Hey friends, Heath Home here, and welcome to another Sunday Fun Day live stream. Today I'm excited to explore the latest update from Ableton Live, version 12.1. It's here, which is currently in the public beta or beta testing phase. So if you see the things that I'm going to show you today in 12.1, if you're able to beta test or beta test, you'll be able to check these things out already. Otherwise, I'm sure it won't be too long before it's released to the general public. So after we're doing a look at 12.1, we'll then dive in and make some music. I'll try and incorporate the two things together. I'll explain, as always, what I'm doing along the way. So whether you're completely new to music production and Ableton Live, or you're a seasoned pro, I'm sure there'll be some key takeaways for everyone in today's stream. In the end, the goal is to inspire you to boot up Ableton Live, go and make some music. Feel free to drop any questions you might have in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. And so without further ado, let's dive in. All right, so we'll just have a very quick test to make sure everything's working. Ah, Alex, very nice to see you there. So, friend already popping up in the chat there. Hope you're doing well. I hope it's all sunny in Germany for you. It's nice and warm in Ibiza today. For us folks here in the Northern Hemisphere, if you're down in the Southern Hemisphere, things are getting pretty cool down there. But I'm sure at this time of day, you'll be sleeping if that's the case, unless you're up very, very late. All right, so let's have a quick test here. Just going to use the audio demo of a sample pack of mine. So if you are already there, Alex, if you could be the one to let me know if the microphone is fine, the levels of that would be much appreciated. And then we're just going to test here some levels on the audio. So hopefully the microphone level is already checked. Just got a bit of music here just to do a test there as well. And this, by the way, is the demo to Small Plug, my latest sample pack called Electronica Volume 1. It's out on my label Distinct Sounds, and you can buy yourself a copy of it. It's also a Midi pack over on my website at heathholm.net. Sounds great. Excellent. Thank you, guys. GYLP2, is this beta? Indeed it is, my friends. This is a look at 12.1, the first, let's say, serious update of Live 12 from Ableton Live. So we're sort of looking in already at what's new about it, what devices are coming with it, what's all the fuss about, because maybe you already know there's a bit of a buzz around, and let's look at what the fuss is all about. So, okay, we've done a few checks there. We know we've got some audio. Microphone's fine. Thank you, Alex, for letting me know. And rather rainy. Okay, well, that's a shame, but probably means it might be good weather for doing some music. All right, so let's bounce off that audio demo and just set ourselves back up to a default project here. Let's also open my info tab down here. I've got a little note up in the right corner to keep that open. That's just so that if I'm doing stuff down the bottom here, you'll be able to see that, and my webcam won't be blocking it. All right, so let's sort of start with what's coming new with 12.1 in terms of devices. There are a few workflow things. Probably not going to go as deep into those, as they are just little minor adjustments about how we can slice and do a few MIDI functions. But the big major things are, if we look at the top here of the browser already with the browser open, we can kind of notice up here this little box that says auto tags, and it's got a little blue icon. If we switch it on, that's fantastic, because it's already a huge user request that when 12 came out in the beginning, if you wish, for example, I have a huge sample library down here that's on my own computer, and all of these packs and things I've collected over the years, all of the samples that are inside all of those packs, they wouldn't automatically show up inside of the browser when we were doing a search. So if we did Command F, I'm on Mac, by the way, which would be Control F if you're on Windows, and we wanted to search for something, we would initially be looking here at all of the samples and elements that come bundled with Ableton Live, which is great. I mean, that's basically we're looking into all the packs and all the content that comes bundled with Live. But if we wanted to look in our own sample library, as I said, and if you're like me and you're doing it a very long time, you're bound to have some favorite packs and sounds and things like that that you want access to. You could access them in the browser, but they weren't tagged. So that means that if we were down here, or let's say we go back to Command F and we just put one shot, and then we put up here something like clap. Now what we're looking at down here is my claps in my sample packs as well as Ableton's content, which is really, really amazing. And that's happening because of this auto tag up here. So I think that was a logical step that we were all hoping was going to happen. You now don't have to manually tag your own samples to have them show up here. As long as auto tag is on, that is going to happen as a default behavior of Ableton's browser, which I think is great. So that's the first thing we can acknowledge here that's changed in the browser. And then what about sort of instruments, effects, things like that? So what we're going to look at a little bit today, if we open up the instrument tab, what we've got that's brand new in here is the drum sampler. And so let's grab a copy of that, drag it over and drop it onto a MIDI track. We'll have a look at this in a moment. So that's brand new. You might think, why do we need another sampler? Why do we need a drum sampler? We've got, this workflow since many, many years in Ableton of simplers, where if you're using drum racks and things like that, so arguably, obviously, you're working for many years, perhaps with drum racks. Any drum rack that we drag in, here's an 808 core kit. All of these pads here, wherever they're hosting a sample, they're inside of a simpler, which is a sampler, right? It's Ableton's basic sampler. So we might think, well, why then do we need a drum sampler? What's that going to do that we don't already have? Well, that's what we're going to look at today, because it's quite interesting. It offers some really nice new workflows and some new bits and pieces. So there's method behind the madness. The other thing is, if we go back to instruments and we look at the drum sampler in the browser, we'll notice that Ableton's kind of helped us out a bit here as well with some presets. So all of these presets in this list here, they are drum racks that now use drum samplers on the pads instead of simplers. So if we pick out one of these as well, just boost my own volume a little bit. So let's say we grab this one here and we drop it over. You'll notice that all of the pads are using the drum sampler device, which is the concept here. So there are some nice presets to get your head around already if you want to test that out, as well as using it like I've put on the first MIDI track here, which is a blank one that's free for us to use however we wish. So drum sampler, number one, brand new. Going to deep dive on it in a second. I've mentioned the drum racks. If you see me looking over to the left, I'm just checking also the comments, but also I've got a little bit of some notes open here so I don't forget things to show you guys and girls. So the next thing, which is probably where the biggest buzz came around, because like I said, drum sampler, it is different and it offers some very cool workflows, but it's not radically different. It's new, it's unique, but it's not that radically different that we couldn't cover almost what it does already. What is, and is really exciting, is over in the audio effects category. And we've now got in here very quickly at the quite close to the top, this device called Auto Shift. And this has caused a huge buzz because Ableton Live now has in its own native devices a pitch correction device, something like auto tune, something that previously again, users of Ableton Live for many years have been crying out for some kind of pitch correction, some kind of tuning device. Well, now we have this built-in device, and that's something I do want to comment on. I think Ableton, are really working quite hard to provide you with devices that come bundled with the software that normally you're buying as third-party devices. So we're starting to see Raw, which overtook a lot of previous need to buy saturation devices. We're seeing Auto Shift, which is stopping you needing really to buy third-party tuning devices. And that to me is I think, to be applauded. I mean, as I said, it means that, okay, you might be paying for these upgrades from 11 to 12, but you're getting quite a lot of value for that. If you have to buy auto tune, it's going to set you back a few pennies. So auto shift, that's the next thing we're going to look at. Absolute game changer, as I said, now built in. So let's just do a bit of housekeeping. I'm just going to call the track up the top here auto shift. Now, it is an audio effect, but that doesn't mean we can't use it in the world of MIDI. So if we have a MIDI track, we could absolutely have shift after our instruments and devices. So we're going to walk our way through that in a moment and how we use it all. What else have we got? Well, we're still going. So if we go in the audio effects as well, these are mostly updates, but we've now got a new facelifted Saturator, which kind of has one thing I've discovered that I really love about it. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. And then finally, so it's refaced, so we can open it up. And some of it looks familiar, but some of it's quite interesting over here that's new. And then we've got a reface limiter as well, which I'm going to pop over on my master track, and later we can put this through its paces. But again, the limiters had a new update. It sounds better. The limiter for me was, again, another one of these devices from Ableton in the past where you might buy third party. I personally love and use all the time the FabFilter Pro L2. That was my go-to limiter, this guy here. So, you know, I probably am not going to throw that in the bin. It's an amazing plugin, but now Ableton Live's own, again, built-in limiter really is quite interesting in terms of workflow. And as I said, I definitely think it sounds really quite nice. So let's maybe get a little bit of a music idea going so that we can kind of put some of these things through their paces a little bit. Maybe we'll start with the auto shift, as it's the most exciting thing, I think, to happen in quite some time. And let's say that we are going to use some samples on this track that we're going to manipulate. And Music Radar, the good folks there, if you go into any search engine and type in Music Radar, and samples, they offered a lot of free samples over the years, and they're quite useful. In this case, I've downloaded their female vocals. I'm not a singer. I'm not going to attempt to sing and use auto shift. Otherwise, I would probably be losing anybody who's here at this point in time. So we're going to use some vocals from within this free Music Radar female vocal sample pack. So you can easily grab this yourself with a quick search online. And let's just get something.
Human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
Okay, I quite like this one. So let's pop it over onto the auto shift track. Let's hit play.
Human nature, human nature, human nature.
And let's keep the volume down for a second, as I do need to do a bit of talking, but it's because I'm kind of explaining and sort of walking you through this in real time so you can kind of follow along and understand what this is going to do. So in its default state, that is when we just drag and drop it, and actually out of interest, I don't really know if there's any presets for this. Perhaps there is. Let's have a look at that actually. So auto shift, not at this point in time, which is fair enough. So there's no kind of presets. I just wanted to check that because I wasn't aware. So in its default state, it's set up to do pitch correction. That's kind of what it's thinking it needs to do when you drop it on the track here. And so if we kind of look at, let's say, down the left-hand side and then work our way across, MIDI in we're going to look at in a little bit, but that's quite exciting. It means we can harmonize using MIDI from other tracks into this device, and we can make this audio either follow the harmony of chords or monophonic material. Down here we've got an interesting section, and this is a little bit about like what frequencies the device is focusing on as far as the tuning goes. And straight away, if you're using like female vocals, you would probably be in the high ends of the material here. So it's kind of like that. If we've got female vocals, we probably want to choose the high frequency area. If we're working more in the mid-range frequencies, we go for mid. And if we're down in bass, we would choose the bass. So I'm probably only going to be working in high today. And then gain, if we need to boost the input signal into here, we can. So let's push play again.
Human nature.
We don't have a problem with the inputs.
Human nature.
And what can we see up here? So basically what's going on in the middle of the device here is in the center here, we see the note names of the pitch it's detecting, and we see this kind of colored meters left and right of the center here. They're basically telling you whether the pitch is a little flat or a little sharp. So yellow being a little flat, blue being a little sharp. And that's what this device would try and correct, is making both the sharpness and flatness be more accurate, which is what we do when we generally, tune a vocal, so to speak. So here we can see the notes we're hitting, and she's sang pretty good, as you would expect in something like this. It's not extremely flicking left and right from sharp to flat, so it's pretty in tune. We've then got kind of the two next main functions in here that affect the tuning. And all of this is tied into this quantizer here. So you can see if I switch that off, well, then this device really isn't doing anything at all. But the quantizer is the pitch correction center of the auto shift. So note detection here, flat and sharp, left and right. We've then got this smoothing and strength, and those two parameters are going to be the things we're going to use to kind of shape it ourselves. Like how much interference do we want the plugin to give, those kind of things. So if we were going for that classic auto tune sound, let's take off the smoothing.
Human nature.
And let's turn it up a bit.
Human nature.
Let's put the smoothing back on.
Human nature.
So you can hear it's much closer to the original vocal. Here we can start to get that auto-tune pitch change, right? So if you're looking for that sort of sound, you can do it in this device. You would turn off smoothing. With smoothing on, we're more, as I said, trying to correct a little bit of sharp and flat, and the same with strength. So we're going to just adjust those by ear.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
You can see now we're much tighter here.
Human nature.
Right? Then if I go back
Human nature.
and have it in its default state. So here I'm kind of dialing it into taste. How much correction do I want? And it doesn't have to be as strong as... So we're kind of leaving some soul there, but at the same time we're kind of, tuning it a little bit so it's a little bit more correct. I'm not going for the auto-tune sounds, but strength and smooth are kind of getting this a little bit more accurate here without creating anything that's unpleasant. Now, speaking of that, if we push play here and we hover over the plugin, I want you to look down the bottom in the left here and you'll see that this device is causing latency, which is pretty normal. It's creating about 16 or 20 milliseconds of latency. So Ableton have thought about that, and that's pretty much the same with any auto-tune device. They're hungry on, computer resources, and latency generally is a part of trying to do this kind of work. So thanks to the good folks at Ableton, they've put this little box up the top here called live mode, and if you switch that on and we now do that, you will notice down there it's absolutely zero latency. So that's very promising, because it means that in a live setting you could absolutely be live performing and have this on tracks, and the computer resources stay low and everything's going to be running quite nice and smooth. Now, there is a little cost perhaps in the sound going in live mode. We've brought it to 0 milliseconds of latency. Perhaps you'll get a little more artifacts, not as clean, not as crisp as it is without that, but hey, you can't have your cake and eat it, as well as we say in English. So, a little compromise there, here or there is something that goes with the territory, but amazing they thought about that. That's going to make live performance quite interesting, which I think is great. So we're going to keep it out of live mode.
Human nature.
So what have we got next? We've played around with these couple of parameters here. The next thing we could do is we could repitch the vocal already, if we like, over here on the pitch.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
So up a fifth. all the way up an octave.
Human nature.
So it's still playing the same notes, but it's now an octave higher.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
Quite like where I had the strength and smoothing. If I take smoothing off again,
human nature.
Not much difference in this case because of the major pitch change over here. You can also, as you can see, this is in semitones, repitching the vocal that's on this track. We can also do it in cents. And then we've got formants. Now, I'm not sure if you understand what formants are, but they're kind of like when we sing, they're a combination of resonances, let's say, that come from the throat and the mouth and the tongue. And so when you're adjusting the formants, you're kind of playing around with that behavior of the mouth and the throat of singing or voices. So let's try playing with that. Let's put it back to its natural pitch.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
So that can get pretty wild. I mean, it can be something that has a little bit of subtleness to it, or it could be something, as you can hear, where I was pushing it there either to the extremes. It was starting to get chipmunky or kind of quite deep and kind of gnarly down there in the low. If you look just below that, there is this F follow. What is that all about? Well, that's sort of formants following the pitch change up here. So if you dial in a value there in percent, what is going to happen is the formants are sort of going to follow what you're doing up here when you're repitching it. So let's try that.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
So again, you've got a lot of scope with all of that to kind of really shape the sound in quite interesting ways. Again, sound design plus correction, up to you. Creativity, or we're just going in here to correct this vocal, get it to sit, harmonize it with a copy of the original. So it's very fast to do that. I'll move there quite quickly in a moment, but we've also got vibrato here on the right, which again, vibrato is the quiver in our voice when we're singing. So again, we can adjust that a bit here if we need to.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
And I think the vibrato's not as strong on the sample I've got here, but it could be perhaps if we're pushing something to its extremes, but it is a parameter that you can adjust that little bit of quiver in the voice. The rest of it down here, well, we can even fade the vibrato in if we want, so it doesn't come in directly. And that's quite a good idea, because sometimes in a real voice, we don't start vibrato until we're holding. So maybe you have nothing in the start and the vibrato happens later on the phrase or the word. So that's quite nice. And then dry wet, if we were balancing it in, we could. Nice. So now you can really hear it just harmonizing here directly as a plugin.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
Super nice.
Human nature.
All right, what's next? Well, if we're looking around here, we notice that we've got this keyboard in the middle, and what's that all about? Well, at the moment, all the notes are effectively selected. So whatever the notes are coming in, at the moment, we've got the possibilities of all the notes being corrected if it's detecting those pitches in the middle here. But you can see down here, you can actually customize that. So you could customize the root notes. And at the moment, we're essentially in a custom mode, because we could start deactivating notes here manually ourselves and just say, well, I only want that voice to be in B and correct it to come out as an F. So you now see it's an F here. only or a
human
B.
nature,
And you see it's now stretching
human nature,
quite far to make everything only be a
human
B,
nature,
right? So we'd need to,
human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature,
so things can get pretty
human
wild as you
nature,
play around that. Sorry if I'm laughing a bit, but it is quite funny, obviously, what we can do as well. So yeah, you can down the bottom here absolutely customize it and say, look, I want this vocal to be all sort of corrected and fixed, so it's just going to produce a B. That could be great to harmonize with a scale or a key of all your other instruments and stuff that's going on in your track. So that's pretty powerful right then and there. But that's one thing we can do. So we can eliminate notes. We could even have just the B plus the F and the D, right? So
human nature,
as you see now,
human nature
is looking for just those notes, and again it will correct the vocal to harmonize with those notes. But let's say we put all this back how it was. So that I love that feature. We've also got down here scale degrees. So this is repitching the vocal. This is moving it within scale degrees. So we could repitch it and move it in a scale degree.
human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
So that's really quite different to what it was before. It's a fifth up on the pitch, and I'm down on my root note by 5. So it's quite a
human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature,
nice.
human nature.
Right, so you can get a lot of sound out of this, as I said, both creatively and correctively. Let's look at what's next here that I really, really like, and that is that while we're in this section of the keyboard and root and scale, well, we can now see that currently our scale awareness of this project is in its default state. It's C major. We can actually switch on the scale awareness in the auto shift, and that then means that you'll notice down here everything's grayed out, and now it's going to make that vocal fit with the key and scale, the scale awareness of whatever you're doing in the project. So now it's working around C major. So if I change it to let's do G minor. So it's now working with correcting it to those notes. That's also really powerful. So it's quite sophisticated to get it to fit with the rest of the music you're doing. You can either manually take control of that, or you can get it to be scale aware inside of Ableton 12. Fantastic feature that. So again, here you can also choose, as I showed you, a different root note, but you can also choose from all of those different scales. So again, you can kind of manually make decisions. You might be very good with music theory, so you might have A minor in here, and you might be working up here with C major, and that's fine. Those two scales are compatible, and so you're doing your own custom thing here, but it's fitting with what's going on in the rest of the track. Let's say that's the concept a little bit there. So let me give you a couple of examples then. Let's kind of put this back to its default, and let's say a little bit like I was doing before with the dry wet, but let's do it slightly differently. So let's say that we've got the main vocal. Let's pop it into a group. So Command G or Control G, click on the top of the device, drop it into a group, open up the chains here. So just show and hide chains on the left-hand side there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click and create a chain, drag that up to the top, and that's going to be dry. So that's going to have no device on it.
Human nature.
So at the moment, the original audio vocal is passing through the group. But as soon as we add now the one auto shift device we've got on,
human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
And now we could bring our volume down here and balance in the auto shifted version to sit with the dry version.
Human nature, human nature, Human nature. Human nature.
Let's put it in scale awareness, so we know that it's fitting the scale. Nice.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
So we've got an octave higher. Let's duplicate the auto shift version down, so we've got a second one copy of it. Let's maybe give it another color. And on that one, let's do something else.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
So it's very possible to build beautiful like chords out of this, you know, like a chorus. We're building up our female singer singing human nature into all of these lovely pitches and scale degrees, so we're getting this harmony.
Human nature.
Up an octave, down an octave, and the original, maybe I'll just call it the original there, which is passing through.
Human nature.
And then we've got shift 1 and shift 2, essentially.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
It's a bit unfair not to give this a bit of nice reverb.
Human nature. Human nature.
And I think that could be the catalyst for the start of our track idea today. So let's get some BPM happening here. Let's go for 124. I'm going to use this vocal. I'm going to use this little harmony idea in a moment. And that could be one portion of today's musical idea as we start to sort of get stuck into that. Let's have a drum sampler. Let's have a kick drum in it. Doesn't really matter for a moment. I just want a simple kick. So I'm going to choose something from my punchy kick folder. Sounds nice. Let's drop in a little pattern just to get some beat rolling, but we're going to look at drum sampler, as I said, properly in a moment. This is just to have some context.
Human nature. 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 Human nature.
Also, if you want to do Daft Punk type things, very easy.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
Could also try beat repeat on this vocal just to see if we can kind of get some little glitches from it.
Human nature. Human nature.
Exactly.
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
Let's maybe make this a little bit more not so often.
Human nature. 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 Human nature.
All right, so it's just a little bit of fun there with the beat repeat. Doesn't have to be there, but hopefully you can understand that that's kind of taking that vocal and adding some nice little fills to it as it's in audio, right? And so what we're kind of doing is getting little extra kind of patterns out of this. So let's start thinking as we go here as well creatively. Could we use this auto shift on anything else? Does it have to be a vocal? Remember, it's a pitch correction device. And as you see now, we're sort of starting to extend it, use it in some of the ways this thing is very, very capable of. So doubling vocals, making harmonies, game on. What else is it going to handle quite well? So let's say we don't use a vocal. Perhaps we do an example of that in a moment. Monophonic material, so feeding it, you know, a guitar, GYLP2, sounds amazing, really experimental music. Yeah, I think so. Maybe a bass. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for chipping that in there. I think guitars, basses, synths, just generally try it on other material that you either want to, because this opens up doors where you might have a synth line that isn't quite in tune with the rest of your scale and key of your track, you could try to get it so that it is in key with the rest of the track. Excuse me, without forcing it too much. And then you could try some harmonizing of it like this. It just, you know, I'm only just touching the tip of the iceberg as usual with ideas here, but love how intuitively quickly it can be used for chorusing, doubling, correcting things, and as I said, putting things in pitch. Now, we haven't used the MIDI in section of it yet. So let's say that we bring a MIDI track over. And what are we going to do? Let's say we do a duplicate of this whole vocal we've got here of auto shift. And let's say that this is going to be the, I'm just going to call it MIDI in so it doesn't get too confusing. And we'll put it through its paces in some of the different ways we can use it. So we'll leave this lovely kind of harmony over here that we've got going, which I've walked you sort of through. We've also got a second page here that we haven't looked at yet, the LFO page. So we'll look at that in a moment as well, so that we can even develop this further, right? So let's say on this one, we're going to only have the original for a moment. So we'll just mute the two harmonized versions. So on this track, track 3,
Human nature.
we're back to kind of our original vocal. And what I want to do on this MIDI track, let's say we maybe use one of the features of 12. Did I have a auto shift on that track? Seems I do. I don't need that. Oh yeah, that's right. I was showing you earlier. You can put it on a MIDI track. So what I want over here is to actually make some chords. So we're going to, let's say we use some of 12's features down here. Let's say we use stacks, which is going to create us some chords out of nowhere here. We're in the piano roll. We've got a bar. Let's say we make it 2 bars long. And then we're looking down here. Now, I've sort of spoken about it before. I want to also, by the way, do a video in the future that is like Ableton Live 12, 6 months since the release. What have I learned about it? But here's a few things as we go. I turn auto off, as if I start clicking, I get a chord already, so that I can just check what's going to happen. So it's going to give me a chord that's C3, the root. The duration would be 1 bar long. That's a bit long for me, so I'm going to come down and I'm going to ask it to give me quarter note chord for the first one, and offset would be the timing. So that would be shifting it in notes through the piano roll. I'm okay with it landing bang on the 1 for now. No inversions, but if we want inversions, you can see in the middle here, we are inverting our triad, right? First for inversion, second inversions, all possible as well. So you can go right out the gate with something different. We're just going to have a C3 root note triad like that, quarter note long, auto, bang, there it is, as easy as that. If we want to move it, offset, it's going to move it note divisions, right? It's moving it around to different note divisions. If we want to do that, if we want to change the root, we do that over here. And if we want to change the chord type, well, we can click in this box here where we get this arrow, and we can now start making a different triad or a 4-note chord. Pretty cool, right? So all of that can happen in here. Let's make another chord. And also, if we want the duration to change, we can do that down here, as you can probably see in a moment as well. Okay. So we can shorten that chord up a little bit if we wish. So let's say we get another chord here somewhere. So let's do another generate. Oops, another, let me click here. Sorry, I want to click here plus. There we go. Now I've got a second chord. That's obviously long because I didn't change anything, but I'll change it sort of manually. So I'm going to bring it across here with the offset, and I'm going to bring it down. Maybe we'll have it all the way to there. And well, let's have a different chord shape or an inversion. That's where those inversions could come in real handy if we were wanting to revoice the chord. This is pretty cool for now. Let's have a 4-note chord there. Let's have another chord. So again, we need to, if we want to do that, click over here somewhere if you like. So we're going to hit plus. We've got another chord there now. And again, obviously, didn't adjust any of that stuff, which is fine. Gonna bring it down to a certain length, and yeah, let's maybe have that chord shape. All right, let's start with that. let's have an instrument on that. So let's say we just pop operator on there for now. Let's have a listen to what we've got.
Human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
Might just bring this across a bit.
Human nature, 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 human nature.
Let's make our synth sound a little bit different.
Human nature, 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 human nature.
All right, so we don't have to listen to this synth if we don't want, but what I wanted to do was make some chords, and those chords are now going to be part of the MIDI in that our vocal's going to listen to. So let's say with this chord track, we might do a copy of this MIDI down. So they've got a second version. Let's call this number 2. And on that one, I'm going to make everything legato in here. So Command A, legato, connecting all those chords up.
Human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
It's kind of crying out for a 4th chord. So maybe we'll try that again. Let's pop it down. And let's maybe over here generate one more chord, I think. Kind of crying out for a little bit of another chord in the mix over here. So what have we got again? If we want to check auto off, let's go for again another shorter chord, say quarter note long, offset. Let's just reset that to 0 for now, and let's do plus. Just check. Might have a mistake there. So let's say we try that again. Ah, okay, I see what I did there. So, you know, it's one of these things with the workflow. I like taking auto off, but, you know, auto in this case trapped me because I was trying to generate chords and auto's off. But obviously I figured out why it wasn't happening. But that's the difference. If you turn auto off, I do it so that I can check what's going to happen. But if you leave it on, then of course we get a new chord, right? So I'm going to click here now. And, you know, if I put auto, you can see it's popping up now, but I'm going to click here and hit generate. I think the position is a little bit out, so let's move it over to there. Cool. Let's maybe try and see. I mean, the voicing's pretty good on all of this, but maybe we'll have another sort of different kind of chord shape. That could be interesting with an inversion, perhaps. All right.
Human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
Let's work on this one a bit.
Human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
Okay, that last chord,
Human nature,
that works. And just a little bit behind on the chat here, make the vocal shorter so the start sounds in time. Yeah, that absolutely could be fair. I mean, it's a bit annoying when we've got something like this going around and around, but is it that far out of
human
time?
nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
Yeah, it should really, the 1 would be here sort of somewhere.
Human nature, human nature, human nature.
That's a little bit better, so can kind of leave it like that. Yeah, okay, but now I've kind of,
Human nature,
yeah, got it better within the phrase that it's in. So we're going to find another vocal as well, but it was mainly to demonstrate, first of all, the auto shift. But I'm with you, Charlie Gray. Add a delay, yeah, of course, we're going to go there, but still trying to demonstrate the 12.1 and the shifter I will probably not use this vocal. Yeah, absolutely. That was because I repitched also the audio earlier, and warping isn't correct on that either. So we can kind of like also fix that a little bit in here, because as you can see, the pitch originally was 120/84, so it's also not exactly happy with that. Just back to GYLP2, I will probably not use this vocal for this track. I think it's supposed to make it sound good in this track. Yeah, I mean, as we said, it's just a demo to look at that. Don't worry about that too much for now. This track, so to speak, isn't really a track at this point in time, right? Just bear with me. We can find a vocal, put it on time, all that kind of stuff. I'm with you, as I said. It's really just to demonstrate more the auto shifter. So let's say if we want a vocal, we'll fix that up in a little bit. But if I take the kick out, it's going to be a lot less noticeable. Yeah, so now we're getting somewhere with it. So let's put looping back on.
Human nature, human nature, human nature.
So yeah, now as I said that I've been working on the warping and things I didn't do before as I moved along. But again, as I said, is this the vocal for this chord and the kick? Not necessarily, but it's here to demonstrate. So we want to look at MIDI in. So we've got this kind of operator track here with some chords on it, right? Probably housey sort of type chords at this point in time. Like I said, we don't actually need to even listen to those. They're the MIDI generation of these chords at the moment. What we want to see is what can happen to this vocal if we use it with MIDI input. So what we're going to say to this vocal is we're going to turn the MIDI on in here. So we're going to open up this MIDI in section of the shifter, open it up, turn it to on, and we're going to, in the input section, have it listen to the operator. So when we want to listen to the operator, we know at the moment that the operator is chords, so it's actually polyphonic. Let's say we do a duplicate of this down, recolor it, and on the duplicate, we'll make it just monophonic. So I'll just turn it also into some kind of just a quick monophonic part. Okay, so just single notes out of there. So now we've got both options here. So let's say we start with the chords as we created those. We can also change the voices. We are only working within 4-note chords max at this point in time. Now the chords are out of time. Yeah, look, Charlie, as I said, it's a demo, my friend. It's about you know, what we're wanting to kind of understand about 12.1 here. So clear. Thanks, Lauren. All right, so over here now we've got just this chords feeding into the human nature and this vocal, and what we're going to hear is the harmonizing of that. So
Human nature.
first of
Human
all,
nature,
turning off the chord track.
Human nature. Human nature.
And if I pitch everything down,
Human nature.
the vocal sits a lot easier because it's from around this tempo, right?
Human nature. Human nature. Human nature. Human nature.
So what we want to do is the trap here was, again, just sometimes getting a little bit mistakes. They do happen in real time. So this is all correct, but it's not on the right device. So there's only one switched on, and that's the, it would be on the original one, let's say. So I'm actually adjusting the second one down here currently. So I'm going to reset that back to how it was. I'll leave that alone. So I'm just going backwards a little bit. Probably went back too far, didn't I? I did indeed. Not to worry. All right, let's get back on track here. Pop that in a different color so we know that. Get back over here. What I was trying to do is leave that kind of alone, the one that I had set up there. Pretty sure that's as it was, but we can copy it over from the other track. which might actually be the way to do it in a second anyway. Let's say we take that off. We've still got our copy here. So we're going to copy that, put that back over here. Perfect. I'm going to turn these off. And in this case, then I am going to put another auto shifter for a second onto the original. There's a bit going on here. And we're going to make it in the scale. So it's listening to C major, it's scale aware. We're going to bring in the MIDI in, turn the MIDI on, and it's going to be listening to the MIDI of the operator in polyphonic mode. And now we should be able to get that workflow happening.
Nature, human, nature, human, nature.
So a little bit like before, I did a legato version of this as well, which is obviously why that's choppy, because of the space between the chords. There's no delay or reverb or anything on here at this point in time. So let's copy that down, make this legato. That will be then less choppy.
Nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
So quite interesting. So this is, as you can see, like a vocoder, like a lot of workflows where we can just use the operator instrument and the chords on that track to feed the vocal inside the shifter and make it harmonize to those chords. And we don't even need to listen to the chords. That was the sort of place I was going with that. As in this case, as I said, it's an option, right? So
human nature, 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 human nature.
So that's with polyphonic.
Human nature, 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 human nature. With or without the chords.
They're providing the harmony, but as I said, we don't have to listen to them if we don't want. They're just the instructions.
Human nature, 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 human nature.
So lots of fun to be had there, really. That's harmonizing to polyphonic. I've given you an example here, like where the choice is it chords and an instrument in the track that we want that instrument to be audible and we're working with it, or is it just a case of it's delivering the MIDI for then the vocal to be, you know, polyphonically shifted to that and giving you this nice kind of almost vocoder feel, right? So let's try it with the other clip that I kind of made in the middle here. One of these, this one down the bottom here, where in this case then we've got kind of a monophonic, and this will be a bit glitchy again because the notes don't currently link up, but we should get, in this case, the vocal is following the monophonic line instead of the polyphonic line. So we could kind of make something a bit more interesting than that to do that example. So we could kind of create a new MIDI clip. Again, perhaps pop down into here. Let's say this time we just use the rhythm. Let's check what we're going to get here. 8th notes, maybe we'll go 16ths. And we'll, velocity wise, let's have some quieter notes. Fine with that. So also possible with monophonic to turn something like, again, pretty cool out of a monophonic line as much as a polyphonic line. And there is more things inside here. If we look into the middle panel that opens up with the MIDI in, we've got where's the source coming from that we choose in our list here, turning it on. We've got mono and polyphonic, as we've discovered. There's glide attached to the mono, which will grey out when we're in poly. And then in the middle here, if we go back to poly, you can also play around with the envelope. So we're softening the attack of the vocal. Also got pitch bends, and you've got latch. If you put key latch on, that would mean that, well, it won't change until another note comes around. So it's like you're holding something down, and it will keep working while it's held down, and when something else happens, the event will change. And then down the bottom here, we've got modulation routings of pitch, formant, volume, and panning, and all sorts of sources of where that modulation can come from. Crazy. So tip of the iceberg, as I said, we don't have to go right down the rabbit hole of just the auto shift, or 2 hours will disappear in no time. But this is pretty exciting as well, because there's a lot of depth here, both creatively and as I said, correctively. So velocity could change the modulation, pressure like MPE, mod wheel, pitch bend, note pitch bend, and slide. So happy days down there. Last but not least, the LFO section is really quite interesting as well. Let's say back on our original one over here that isn't listening to the chords then.
Human nature,
Just doing this harmony work over here.
Human nature,
So that's the original.
human nature, human nature, human
What we can do is on one of these layers, we could look at an LFO. So let's say we pick the layer that is the octave up layer of the harmony that's going on here. We turn on the LFO, and the LFO, as a fairly standard LFO kind of parameters, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with that. We've got re-trigger up here. We've got the ability to adjust the start and the attack of the LFO, all the delays, so we can kind of phase shift it. That's pretty cool. We've got the rate in note sync or hertz. We've got the different shapes here. And then we've got, again, where we are putting the LFO on the shifter. So let's say on this layer, layer 1, in this harmony, let's have the panning modulating with an LFO. Let's make it quite extreme.
Human nature, human nature, human nature.
So that layer
Human nature
is switching nicely left to right.
Human nature,
Only that layer.
human nature, human
So if we
nature,
pop something on here,
human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature, human nature.
without that panning modification, as you can see, without the LFO, we're very much a mono signal. We can develop this nice bit of stereo interest by modulating that. Perhaps we go for slower. So a very slow pan left and right. So let's leave that on this layer. Let's maybe make it a bit more interesting. Let's have, say, random, sample and hold. So it won't even be the same each time. Nice. Bring it in a bit now, so it's not quite so wide. And then let's maybe have on the other layer, the octave down, let's have an LFO there. And let's maybe do a tremolo, so we'll wobble the volume, or we could do vibrato on the pitch.
Human nature, 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 human nature.
So if we just listen to this layer,
Human nature, 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 human nature.
right? So you can, you know, with a bit of creativity here in the LFOs, we could make harmonies, but each layer is doing its own thing, and suddenly we've got a very complex and interesting, what was an audio clip of a vocal that's become another whole new, you know, completely new track and element, right? So let's maybe just tone this down again so it makes sense as a layer a little bit. So let's say we perhaps go for frequency. I quite like a little bit of saw.
Human nature, 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 human nature.
Right, so that's a good look at the shifter in the sense of what it can bring to the table, what it's designed for, how it starts as a default device, as a pitch correction, and how we can actually start to double it, harmonize it, work it with MIDI, both monophonically and polyphonically instruments. And again, the source material we're using here, it really could be virtually anything. I'm definitely going to try this out on, I think earlier GYLP was talking about basses and things like that. So other elements would be great. So let's say that perhaps we change this vocal, as there was a fair few comments about it being out of time and stuff like that when I get to my music idea. So maybe I'll work on having a better element here. And I can leave the rest of it pretty much set up as it was. I'm going to leave that off, and let's say that we just see if there is something a bit more usable in that free area. And we've also listened to that a long time, that particular one.
World, take some time, take this love, take this love. You walked into my life, you walked into my life, you walked into my life. You walked into my life. You walked into my life.
And that's the other problem. A lot of these probably not holding up so good about around the tempo I'd like to play them at.
Forget about her. Forget about her. Forget. Do you love me? Don't you think it's time?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go for something out of this. I mean, thanks to the folks at Music Radar for their free samples. It's been great to demo what I've been doing here, but
there's something about the way we met.
Yeah, something like this, I think, is more kind of perhaps what we could work with here. And we can even kind of probably...
There's something about the way we met. I can tell we are deeply connected. Should this be, or should we nurture this and let it?
Okay.
There's something about the way we met. I can tell we are deeply connected. Should we let this be, or should we? There's something about the way we met. I can tell deeply connected. Should we let? There's something about the way we met. I can tell we are deeply connected. Should we let this be, or should we nurture this and let it grow?
Yeah, and I'm also going to, when I do end up working with this, just make it in a short loop rather than a masterclass on warping long loops as well. So we'll come back to that in a sec. But again, once again, if we take things away and we're listening to the shifting.
I can tell we are deeply connected. Should we let this be, or should we nurture this and let it grow? Would it be better if I let you go? Just wanna let you know there's something about the way we met. I can tell we are deeply connected. Should we let this be, or should we nurture this and let it grow? I would prefer if you don't let me go. Just wanna let you know.
Nice. So there's lots of options there. Don't have a key for that, so it's good to be able to actually get it into a key if we like and tune it into that. So let's come to the drum sampler, which is the little device that we looked at a little bit earlier. So we've got a drum rack here, which I sort of, if you're joining the stream sort of now, you might have missed that earlier, that we've got this new instrument, the drum sampler, and Ableton has given us a bunch of presets to do with that, where all of the drums in those drum racks are inside samplers. Let's look at one on its own with some sort of drum sound that's a bit more kind of interesting than just a kick. This is one on its own, it's a kick. But let's get something else in here that's kind of a bit more like a percussion sound or something like that. So let's say maybe, let's do a bit of a search. And let's say we go one shot. And let's look up here for something, I don't know, like a cajon, or do we have any of those? We should have that in my own sample library. Okay. Could be a loop, but just a single shot would be great. Also loops. Okay, also loops. We could work with those, but like a one shot if I can. There we go. Found one. Okay, great. So let's get back there. Let's just bring that over here for a sec because I didn't put a simpler drum sampler on here. Now I have. Now I'm going to drag that into there. All right. So let's say also it's a bit quiet in there, so we might need to boost that sort of slightly. Let's have a listen to what it sounds like, and let's put in a couple of MIDI notes for the cajon. Let's say we have a little bit of conversation with the kick with it. Be the idea. Switch off some of this stuff for a moment.
Something about the way we met, I can tell
Yes, the vocal is not on time. Yeah, absolutely. But that GYLP2, the audio clip is 140 BPM. Just change the BPM. Not exactly. I'm aware that that vocal is 140 BPM, but it's actually, as I warped it, it's already now at 124 ppm. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the warping engine, but there's no need to make Ableton be 140 just to use that vocal. But I'm aware of that as well. So thank you for pointing it out, but there's no need for that. I want to work at a tempo that I want to work at, and I just grabbing that vocal and we'll repitch it or readjust the tempo to this tempo. Okay, so the cajon. That's kind of what I was looking for, that little bit of a conversation. By the way, I had my info tab off a little bit before, so hopefully you've still been able to see what's going on. So let's say we increase the volume slightly, but I actually don't want to increase the volume of the output. And one thing here is there is a gain here, which is great. So I can do it here, right, in the input. I don't have to adjust the output at this point in time. I want to boost my cajon within the drum sampler. So first of all, that's nice and easy here. And we can kind of see the waveform changing. Yeah, I'm not relying on Ableton at all. I will, when I just to point it out, guys. If I do a vocal, I would do it all manually, proper old school way to get it in time. I don't rely on. I have auto warp long samples off, and I would go through it all manually. But the purpose of today is sort of 12.1, so we've kind of don't even really need to have a vocal, so to speak. If you want to see me do warping of vocals, absolutely you can do that another day, but it was mainly to show you the auto shift plugin. That's why I had a vocal there. The rest of it is kind of not so important at this point in time from my ends, put it that way. So the cajon, a bit louder now, easy to do inside of here. We've got a start point, which means you can trim the sample directly in here. That's pretty straightforward. Again, what we want to look at with this in a moment is why is it different to a simpler, right? Because we've got simplers, we've got samplers in Ableton. Why is this drum sampler interesting? Why do we need it? So this is quite nice, fairly intuitive. Change the sample start. change the length, adjust the gain inside it. It's quite nice because in the simpler you would be normalizing it to increase the volume. We've then got a very simple envelope changer here: decay, attack, and hold. We don't have ADSR, but we have like a shortened version of that. So if we wanted to be more plucky, we can. So a nice basic envelope there, or we go back and we have a rounded attack. So lots of shaping possibilities, but we kind of expect those, or we should expect those. So that's shaping the envelope of the sound. We've then got transposition if we want to pitch it up or pitch it down. I've also got note trigger or gate, which would be good if you were playing the notes in with a drum machine or drum pads. With the gate, it's only going to cut off as soon as you let go of the note. Trigger plays all the way through. Once you tap a note, it plays all the way through the sound. If it's in gate, it would just cut off as soon as you let go of the note. So that's nice if you're real drumming. But the fun starts in this when you get over to the right-hand sides here. Just looking at volume as well, definitely probably a bit quiet. So we can actually boost that a little bit for a moment in our new limiter. We'll look at that later. All right, so we've got this cajon doing its thing. The interesting thing is going to be over here, and we've got a filter section built in, pretty straightforward. We've got a steep cut, a steep low cut, steep high cut, a regular high cut, and a bell. So you can do filtering within the device itself. Again, pretty much the same as a simpler, right? So why don't we even, we can't really because it will replace it. But if we put it next door, you know, on the simpler, we've got all the filter down here, the second page, the volume envelope, but this is all quite nice. It's all in the front, it's all in the first page here. So this is quite straightforward. Volume of the output, panning, volume velocity, again, same concept as the simpler. This is where things get interesting, and this is why the drum sampler stands out to me. It has all of these options directly within it. Stretching, amazing. Looping, amazing. A pitch envelope, punch, 8-bit, FM frequency modulation, ring modulation, a sub oscillator, noise and stretch. So we can now, inside the device, play around, and we've got this XY controller, which is also kind of cool. So you can kind of drag it, and each of these two knobs down here, they're going to change depending on what you've chosen here. So right, that is pretty cool, and it's not possible in a simpler. So we've got stretch. Let's have a look at loop. So right directly in here, you can kind of get some interesting sound design results with things like stretch, looping the sample itself. The cool thing with the looping is you can kind of see where your loop is, and you can adjust the offset and length of it. So you could do some really nice release loops, as they're known with this, where you're kind of focusing on it playing through, and then it gets to the loop and does the looping in the release bit of the sample. But you know, this isn't the perfect sample for that. But much like the harmonizer, do we have to put drum sounds in here? Not again. We could put any sort of sounds we like again. I'm thinking kind of chord one-shots and stuff could be very, very interesting here. So maybe we play around with that. remember this was a cajon a moment ago, and now because of like the power that lives in here, we can get really, really cool, interesting sounds of a one shot and stretch it into so we could come down here with our sound design heads on and generate a new pattern. And this is all because of the loop in the FX section. Let's try the stretch. I did have the reverb and delay send there, giving me just a little bit of extra spice. So let's say we pop up a couple of those effects behind here, so you can kind of, we can play around with those as well if we wish, shape the sound a bit further. Right, so let's keep exploring here. Stretch and loop are really interesting. They're straight off the bat. Pitch envelope. And then we can shape these. So again, we can add a really nice transient, pitchy sort of sound to whatever sample we're working with inside the drum sampler. This is why I love this device, because at first glance you think, why do we need it? Well, having all this manipulation here is awesome from my side. Okay, let's keep going. So pitch envelope, punch. Sounds to me like something that could be really good for getting that kind of techno reverby sort of style kick kind of follow if you wanted, because it's giving me that kind of feeling to it. The rumble, let's say, that a lot of techno producers use on their kick drums. So this is dry, no effects. Sort of thickening the sound, thinning it out a bit up here. So an interesting when the punch, probably take a little bit of definitely listening to that to get it dialed into what you want it to achieve. 8-bit should be lo-fiing. Okay, let's now go for some frequency modulation. I mean, as I said, this to me is amazing for one-shot sound designing directly inside of it, and we're getting a baseline kind of sound out of a cajon here. I'm going to have to do it because I don't know if this works, trying this out in real time. It does work. So for those of you making some electronic genres such as techno and things like that, I mean, or just sound designing in general, this is a cajon playing quite a simple pattern here, and there's all sorts of sound shaping and possibilities here. So I just wanted to try an LFO, see if I could modulate the frequency. For sure, we could also do the amount here if we wish. Double treble. Right, one thing I'm going to do here, so I must admit on my notes over here, just looking, Alex, love the variety of sound, the different possibilities, absolutely. Thanks, Lauren Bouchard, by the way, I didn't see that, so clear, thanks Heath. And again, sorry for those of you who wanted a vocal on time and all that kind of thing. As I said, it was more looking at 12.1 and these new devices. You know, plenty of music making sessions to come where if you need to see that, we'll put vocals in and we'll get them bang on time and warp them and do that sort of thing. But this was an exercise to kind of show you what is coming new in the 12.1 update that's currently in beta and will become public. This is Ableton Live's first major update at 12 being 12.1. We've got drum sampler, we've got a new phase saturator, a new reface limiter, sounds different, behaves a bit different, and we've got this auto shift, which I've kind of deep dived on without even taking it to where it could go. So we've seen it monophonically, polyphonically with Midi in, we've seen it reharmonizing, we've seen it doubling. It's really, really, really interesting stuff. And this is why, as I said, sometimes the critics come out with why update, it's not worth the money. Well, you're getting, you know, built-in devices now that are as good as third-party ones that you're paying probably as much as the update to add them to your library. So what I want to do, one of my disappointments with the drum sampler that I discovered when I did have a bit of a play around with it is I'm in love with this FX section for reasons that you can see, but I was a little bit disappointed that we can't combine them. So please, Ableton, if you're listening or you see this in the future, I'm definitely going to put this into the feedback section. I'd like to be able to combine these things, but we can't in the device itself. So every time I'm switching from one or the other. Okay, not like adding this to this to this, but there's always a workaround to that, and that would be if we group the cajon into a rack and we duplicate it down, then we can kind of do that right in a backdoor way. We're going to get two layers of the cajon, so we need to adjust our volumes and put the layer 1 with layer 2, but on the second layer we can have something different, right? So if I go in the second layer here, the green one, and we go back to say the looping, and let's bring the volume down a little bit on the first layer. Now I've got the combination of my looped cajon and my repitched FM cajon. If you want super loud volume, go ahead, but for me, I'm always going to make these layers work the way I want them to layer. So do I want that FM layer the dominant layer, or the looped layer the dominant layer? do another layer. Well, let's maybe grab another sample now. So let's kind of, again, take this a bit sound designy. So let's reset everything we've got adjusted for a second, get it all back to default. And let's get another sample of something else. So let's try actually something that I had in mind before. So let's do Command F. And let's do chord one shot. See what happens here. Okay. Yeah, that's what I suspected. You know, it doesn't matter what the material is that goes in here. So many possibilities here. Let's try it with the cajon. Might be interesting what the layer is. Wasn't a deliberate plan to do that, but it's kind of interesting. But this I did want to check. Was it possible for any one shot? So again, think what you put inside here, and perhaps even a loop will work as well. And it will, so you'll just only be able to choose however long the note length is what's determining how much it's playing back. I agree with you, JYLP2. This is kind of why I wanted to move on a bit from that vocal fiasco of the timing of the vocal, as you know, these are the devices that we sort of want to understand and get stuck into and see what's going on, right? All right, so let's look further afield back to the cajon for a second. And let's just look at what else we had. Let's make another layer of it in our rack here. And let's explore the ones I haven't shown you yet. So we got to FM, we've also got ring modulation. I'll just reset a few things. Yeah, so we get that classic very nice, classic ring modulation sound, so that's lovely as well. And they all sound really good, all these FX engines built in here. There's a sub bass, so we could add a layer of sub bass here. So again, thinking like that, we could have one kick here. So think about this, we could have a kick drum here. We could do my little rack over here, and the first kick has no effects, which you can disable here, and you just shape it how you want, and then layer it with another kick underneath that you then turn on the sub oscillator and have that kind of working as your sub layer underneath. You could use a Max for Live LFO on the start. Yeah, absolutely. Game on. Exactly right. Yeah, you could modulate this, is what you're speaking about, right? Absolutely. Love that technique. Definitely can do that in here. 100%, which is why I was messing a moment ago with the LFO over here. There's lots of possibilities there. And I wanted to check, can you start modulating things? So if we check it for you, I believe the answer will be that we can. So if we put another LFO here and we say, can we map it to that? Yes, we can. Great. So yes, you can do that workflow there. Absolutely. And it will sound great. So we've got sub oscillator. That's pretty straightforward. It's just adding beef and sub to whatever the sample is. But again, they sound really good. So for me, that would be great to layer under a bass one shot or a kick drum and have this nice sub layer in it. So I really think this drum sampler, people probably will overlook it a little bit because the auto shifter's mind blowing, but I think this is just as good. We've also got a noise layer. By having all these cajons, they can all be different. So I can turn this noise layer into like a hi-hat. And then layer it with what we have. Let's drive my limiter a little bit less. I know it was nice and loud a moment ago, but it was driving a little bit hard. So yeah, this drum sampler, great. Got to the bottom almost. Noise is the last one there. Absolutely love that device. You know, it's also in these drum kits, which I showed a little bit earlier, so you can kind of go in and also play with it in a drum rack. All of the instruments, all of the samples, should I say, are all inside drum samplers. That could be really interesting. Let's build a fast beat in here. So we'll do it kind of just programming it for today. Just make it a little bit more elegant with some velocity changes, so it's got a bit more human feel as it's being programmed. This is also, for those of you who program out there, the fact that you can make in 12 things very fast to have a human feel. So why I did that is now you can sort of like play around with a few things here. And again, with sort of a sound design type head on, if you look at this new drum sampler drum rack, of course, all the samples are in there. And we know that we've got all those beautiful FX engines, right, that are going on inside of the different samples. As you can see, as we click around, and some have already been selected to do different things. We've also got, you know, some parts of this preset over here where we can drive the color amount and output. So let's just check that for a second. What is actually mapped there? So the drive amount is okay. So it's all to do with the effect that's after it. So the thing is now that let's open up here the snapshot area of the drum rack. Let's save this default configuration of what's going on now, and then we could start randomizing this a bit. But before we do that, before we click randomize, because we've now guarded what we've got here, what I wanted to show you, which is what I was thinking before, a little bit like the cajon, and how I've sort of shown you how that with the drum sampler can turn into something really quite wild. Well, if we sort of right click down in here, we could kind of see at the very bottom, copy the value to siblings. So if we put something like 50%, something like that on the amount knob, or we change the frequency knob, we can copy that over. And so all the other different devices that have that should be following that kind of workflow, was the idea behind it. So I think potentially we could kind of also but instead, actually, I'm going to undo that. Let me just go back a couple of steps. There we go. What I'd probably do is maybe map some of this stuff to a new macro. So let's maybe try that. So let's open up the macros. Maybe pop it over there and then map to all siblings, right? So that now is kind of part of the rack here. Did I do that right? Gonna have to come back on that. Was there already a dry wet there, potentially on 5? Sorry, I need to check that. I think I made a mistake where I put that. Let me just come back one sec. Let's just try it again. So let's put it on 6, then we know. Okay, so it's going into that part of the rack, that's why. Okay, that's fine. That can then also be mapped over to this part of the rack if we like. So at the moment, we've got 2 racks going on, so let's undo that. So if I map this to macro 5 and then map that to macro 5, it's now here. So it can be be in that pathway, and then back to here. Let's see, I would try that, copy that to all siblings. So now let's say we have another one of those. Yeah, that might be a bit experimental for today, something to play around with in the future, but I think potentially with some kind of clever mappings and stuff here, you could randomize the kit and values of the FX inside the drum samplers. That's kind of what's going on inside my head here, but with what I was thinking to do here. So that pathway kind of is the pathway I'd be following to do that, but I'm not sure if it has copied all the values over and what it's actually doing in the rest of the kit. But something interesting to think about maybe anyway. But let's come back to the default kit. Nothing's changed here now, and we're back to how the kit was. So that's interesting on that side of it, I think, for, you know, that there are some possibilities here to, you know, go reach further in on the drum samplers inside of a drum rack and randomize them in here and some of these FX parameters. That was the idea there. All right, let's take a look at Saturator now. And let's have the simpler can go. We've got a bit of bits and pieces going on here. I'm not sure if our chords are usable with what we've got. Maybe we'll just have a little check at that. Not really. It doesn't need to be anything as complicated as that. So maybe we'll just have one chord in here and make it kind of quite like a little techno idea. So let's do a stack in here. Let's come right back to 1 quarter note. Root note could be fine as C3. Triad is fine. Auto. And let's maybe shift it a little bit in. Let's make a pattern a bit longer. Actually, just before I do that, just going to duplicate it over. modify this chord slightly. Okay, now let's have a little bit of a sound designy thing going on behind this chord. So I'll show you a little trick here. Let's have the hybrid reverb. Let's go into user, so down the bottom here. And what I want to do is I want to find something just that's a reverse sound. So let's just go back to a Command F, search of everything, one shot, and I want reverse. Just something like that. I'm going to drop that into the hybrid reverb. Now let's have a listen to our chords. So we now get this nice reverse tail on it. And let's add to that a nice bit of echo. And we'll modulate the timing of the echo. Yeah, I think normally I'd play these chords in, but that just gives us something a little bit more interesting in here to go along with what we have. And let's say we just manually stretch them out a bit. All right, so Saturator device. Let's pop it on the chords after the operator here, and let's see what is new about the Saturator. It's had a reface. Let's pop it there just after the operator on these chords. It looks pretty similar at the front here. We can choose the different types of saturation shapes. You can see here that you can open up the clipping area and have soft or hard clip. You can focus an amount of the saturator on the low end only, or particularly drive it, and you can go both cutting and boosting. We've got this kind of color box here, which I'll show you all about that in a moment. And then we've got our usual sort of candidates with the saturator, driving it, so changing the saturation shape, and then our output to kind of balance that. Now, what I think they've done an amazing job of here is this section, because when we open up the saturator now, we've got this panel here that, as you can see, if we click this color box in the middle, we deactivate this area or we activate it. And if I now was to boost the low, you can see what it's doing to the audio there, either cutting or boosting. right, over here. And this is on the output, what it's doing, right? And if you want to change the high bit of the saturation, so you've kind of got two bands that you can add the saturation to or modify what it's doing. With the high band, you've got a bit more. You can boost and cut, but you've got frequency choice. It's a bit like the channel EQ in Ableton Live, and then the width of it. So let's have a look. It's on the chords right now. So this is the chords coming through there. Let's maybe loop one of these up so we can sort of see it for longer. And now let's play around a little bit. So if we drive the analog clip saturator, what I love about this is you now see two lines, the white being what is being output from the saturator and the grey in being below the line, much like the compressor, which means it's so much, if you're a visual learner and you're using Ableton Live and you like to visually learn things, you can now take the output here and you can bring that white line down to the grey. So, I mean, I trust my ears, but that was a visual balance, and that's pretty good. And I must say, by the way, I do love now that this is another little thing that happens in 12 that's could have gone under the radar, but all of the metering on either side of the devices in 12 now, in Ableton 12, is much, much bigger. And you can see now, much clearer, what is the input and what happens after the device it's gone through there. So you can also use your eyes there to now balance those levels. So A being, if we turn this on and off, we'd have the same result. So I love that. So this is really, really nice, this area. And if you turn it off, as you can see, we don't get that metering, or we do get the metering, but we don't get the behavior of the low boost or the higher band boost. So let's say we play around with that. So we could cut the low, we're only saturating up here, or we could be boosting. The one thing with the low is you can't move the frequency points, but you could adjust it by, well, you could once you perhaps, you could make it work a bit with the higher one perhaps to shape it a little bit, but it's kind of a bit of a waste because the higher one you can then use to do something else with it, right? So let's reset the higher one a bit, because then with the higher one, say we don't have any low, we go a boost on the high, and we're looking for a specific frequency perhaps. Let's make it a bit subtle, turn it off. Back on again. Output and drive is nicely balanced. Let's try some of the other shapes. And these have been around for a long time. There's not really any different saturator shapes. So yeah, this is really great for, as I said, balancing out the saturator. So we've now really fattened up that synth sound. But looking at the plugin itself, we're pretty much matching in and out, but it sounds louder, but it's more fuller. I agree with the GYLP2, it's absolutely sick. I mean, again, really, really great. The raw I absolutely love, but this has now made Saturator just a dropping in device, and this visual clues for getting your drive and output balanced is really, really nice. So again, if you put the drive down, you'll see that let's put the saturator after the reverb, see what that sounds like. Really nice. Much better after the reverse reverb. It's not even a straight reverb, it's going backwards. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to make such dark, moody music today, but it's kind of turned out that way, so I hope you've enjoyed it. Didn't go any further with doing any of the time stretching of the vocal and all that kind of thing, but as I said, that takes sometimes some time, and I didn't really want to waste the time today. It was mainly showing you the drum sampler, the reface saturator, the auto shift, which we deep dived on. Let's say now, let's take a look lastly to wrap up today's live stream at the limiter, which is also refaced, and I've been using it on the master track just to kind of boost a little bit the output when I was playing some quieter sounds. So what have we kind of got all together at the moment? So let's look over here on the master track and let's look at the limiter and see what's different about it. It's had a reface. It sounds to me better than the original one, and it behaves like a regular limiter to start with. So basically if you're familiar with the limiter's role, if we're using a limiter, kind of you can think of it like the bouncer on the nightclub door. It's not going to let any signal sound past it. That's kind of the role of the limiter. It sets a ceiling and says none of you are going to get past this point. The ceiling being currently down the bottom here, minus 0.3, which is normally a good ceiling, or -1 even, so even lower than that, where you click in there and you put -1, nothing's going to get over that. You've got then the input gain, where you're going to turn up everything that's currently playing up towards that ceiling, and once the limiter then starts working, it starts trimming off whatever's the loudest things that are hitting in that ceiling. It's going to trim off those elements. So don't want to do a limiter masterclass, but hopefully that helps you understand what's going on. So if we push play, at the moment the limiter's not doing any limiting whatsoever, and when it is, we'll see in the gain reduction some yellow flickering and a number pop up here when it starts to catch the peaks, because right now our total track parts that are playing are sitting at like -3 or something like that, near to -4. So we know that we can increase them up to this -1, and then things will start limiting. So now we've got a little bit of things, the limiter's catching them and saying, hey, you're not going over me, and it's now starting to do some limiting, but we've increased our overall volume by quite a bit. And I think if you listen to something like, so let's say we just concentrate on the drums for a moment. Listening out for that, the clap really. So that's how it sounds with no limiting. It's nice and punchy, crisp. And when you limit it, you want it to kind of follow that behavior. So often the tip for learning how to hear what the limiter's doing is to kind of pull out your transient heavy sounds like kicks and claps, and make sure that when you're limiting them, that you're not doing a lot of damage to that, and they sound really, you know, soft and spongy and not particularly nice. So in this case, I was kind of focusing on the clap in that mix of sounds, and kind of making sure that when I've boosted the gain, that it's still sounding like how I wished it to sound. But this is gentle limiting anyway at that amount. So what else have we got in terms of controls? Well, we've got a look ahead. That can be useful with limiting, because it allows it to kind of go ahead and listen to what's coming before it does the limiting, and that can be useful. So you can obviously go further ahead in the track. That generally uses more CPU loads on limiters, but you can have a look ahead, so it's kind of previewing what's coming up ahead of time. And then we've got these 3 modes: standard, soft clip, and true peak. Now true peak, again, that's maybe for another day, but it's a behavior of limiters that have a lot to do with analog to digital conversion of sounds, and the fact that with that conversion, the peaks of analog sounds can actually go over 0 dB. So therefore you might think everything's not going over that ceiling, but it could potentially be going over that ceiling depending on the analog digital conversions. So if you put true peak on, that actually will make sure that won't happen. But some people don't like that, but it is what the true peak is about. And the soft clip, again, it's actually doing a bit of clipping like the Saturator, which can sound quite nice. I quite like what that sounds like. So that's all new, that sort of section. And you can play around with that and listen to the results. And you've also got a very interesting one here of currently left-right routing. So the limiting is on both the left and right channel, so equal. But we can switch it over, and now we've got mid-side. So it's limiting differently on the mid signals in the middle of our track and what's going on in the sides. And that's pretty cool, because that's brand new. So that's quite nice. So we can obviously hear we're louder. Let's do a comparison. Let's put this limiter in left-right. Still a quick bit of key mapping here. Let's make this one number 2 and this one number 1. Back out of there. So left, right mode with the same setup. This kind of sounds a bit more normal. Sorry, the mid side sounds a bit kind of more, I don't know, punchy. Let's also put it in standard, sorry, which is the default mode first. So mid side on the left one. Now this one sounds a bit to me like more pumpy. And this one sounds more uniform, which you can kind of see visually, and I can kind of hear that as well. But the mid side could be very, very interesting. Something to play around with there. It's a new option, and I do like the fact that we've got that. So let's say we're back on our standard left and right sig channels both equally. Now let's try the three modes. So you can see the standard. Did it change the behavior up here? So that's how much gain reduction. Yes. So it's gentler. The standard limiter's working a bit harder than the soft clip. It's just a gentle bit of clipping, so we need to drive it harder to get the same. So you can always click here to recalibrate things, which is nice. And then let's look at true peak then. So, you know, in something like this, what we're doing today, it's really like, you know, you want to set yourself up this kind of test and simulate it, and then you can kind of get a feel for what these different modes do. But there's no doubt about it that they are interesting. And if I read what Ableton says, it says allows us to choose alternative modes for the limiter. Soft clip will introduce some gentle clipping when signals approach the ceiling, which we actually set to even lower than -0.3. We can put it back there. Soft clip, bit of gentle clipping. Whereas true peak will prevent intersample peaks, and that's those peaks, as I said, where it might seem like we're not going over the ceiling, but we actually are, and true peak will make sure that doesn't happen at all. So I think it's more transparent would be what I would say, how it sounds. I definitely trust it a lot more, like the options in it, and that's the limiter with its reface. So on that note, I don't know if there's any questions. I don't think so. Haha, sounds great. Alex in the chat, GYLP2 now is really like the Pro L2, so great. Yeah, it's definitely, as I said, much improved there in terms of what it can do. I didn't show you the maximize, which is also a new part of it, so let's just quickly touch on that. The maximize changes completely the behavior. So when you turn on maximize, lowering the threshold, this guy up here, tells us here, will reduce the dynamic range and increase the loudness. This is achieved by amplifying the limiter stage. So if we pull the ceiling down, let's put the input back to 0. Put that back up, turn maximize on. You can see there's a bit of a change here. Output's at 0, maximize is now on, and the threshold is yellow. And now as we go down with the threshold, we increase the dynamic range, decrease it, and the loudness will go up. But this would be one to test, which was something I was running earlier when I was looking at the maximize. I was running the limiter in its normal setup and then the limiter with the maximize setup, because again, if you do that little tip that I was talking about, kicks, claps, snares, the loudest sort of bits normally in your electronic tracks mix, listen out for their behavior change of those. And with the maximize, it could be sounding better and you get all excited because it's louder, but you're really squashing the life out of your transients. And so in the end, I kind of preferred the limiter in its normal configuration, but interesting, it's kind of got this option of a maximizer sort of thing. So as I said, Ableton tells us when the maximizer's on, lowering the threshold will reduce the dynamic range, so it's bringing the quieter stuff up, the peaks down, and increase the loudness of the signal. This is achieved by amplifying the limiter stage output by the inverse of the threshold value. So some interesting stuff going on there. Again, something you can try out. And of course, it works in all of the other different modes. So limiter got a big boost as well. Congratulations, Ableton, on what I think is a really good first serious update to 12. And I hope you agree. And I hope what I've shown you today and walked through has been beneficial. Again, apologies from my end about the vocal, wasn't perfectly in time. Just grabbed something to demo that, as I said, and in the end, I didn't really try and build a serious track today with that. Plenty of more sessions where we can make music from scratch and go through those kind of elements. It was more about the updates today. That was the focus, what I wanted to kind of share with you guys and girls. If you're beta testers yourself, get stuck in. If not, this will hopefully come out very, very soon into the public, and you'll just update your 12 and away you go. Thanks for those of you who commented in the chat today. It's been nice to see some of you. Alex, been great to have you with me. Charlie Gray, not sure, it might have disappeared once the vocal thing didn't get sorted out. GYLP2, great to have you on board. Thanks for your comments. I don't know where you tuned in and listening from. Been good to have you. I will put a link at the end of the description here to a video that you probably enjoy if you've enjoyed today, looking back at 12 and how I started my journey with it, and what perhaps you can take away from looking at that video. And coming up soon will be a 6 months on review, as well as what I think are things that I'm always using, and perhaps some things I've learnt, or mainly things I've learnt along the way since using 12. So have an awesome rest of your weekend. Sunday evening, afternoon. It's going to be a ciao from me in Ibiza. Heath Home signing out, and I will catch you in the next stream next weekend. Come join me then for all things Ableton Live. Bye bye. Ciao for now. Take care. Bye.